Okay, great. Hi, it's Ed Smyth here from Smyth Window Salvation and Revival, and this is the first session of our preservation fair tonight, where I wanted to cover the basic infrastructure of a window, which you might call the window nomenclature, with a theme of then what it is that you're looking at when you're trying to decide, first of all, then what your condition of your window is, and if you can resolve any operational issues on your own. Which, like our friend Kim has been asking me earlier, how do I get my windows up, and if I get them up, can I get them back down again? So I'm going to touch on that as well. So what's convenient is here at Steam is they've got old windows. Kim, do you know what the age of the school is?
I'm not sure actually.
Okay. I would guess that it's probably like a 1910, 1920 perhaps.
I would imagine, yeah.
And so this is a very typical example of window construction. Window construction is very similar across ages and types until you get into modern windows, which we aren't going to talk about. But as long as you have a historical building or home, all the structure of a window is exactly the same. So what you have is then you have the two parts, and they're called double hungs, meaning that both the upper sash and the lower sash were hung separately, double hung. The reason for that is that the upper sash could be lowered to let all the warm air out from the ceiling level, and you could of course raise the lower sash to let the nice cool air come in below. So the idea of a double hung is that the lower sash can go down, the upper sash can go up, either together or in part of your wall. And so with a high ceiling building, like you normally have in an older historical home, is that all that warm, moist air that's building in the ceiling can have a place to escape. And that creates then a pressure differential, a vacuum if you will, that then draws in the cool air from below. Double hung. So in a double hung window is you always have two parts of the window. These are called the window stops. And sometimes people might refer to them as the trim, which is fine. But they're called stops, and they're normally held by either screws or nails. There's no other choice. These here are very typical. These stops, which I pre-removed, have these little metal collars. These collars that go in here are very handy because they're oval shaped. I put this down for a moment. So rather than a straight hole, it's an oval like this. And the intent was that then, when they were in good prime condition, is you could unloosen the screws and you could move the stops in or out to adjust for any rattling or tightness.
That's smart.
Yeah. Otherwise, if you don't have the holes in the collars, then sometimes they're just held in by finishing nails, which makes it a little more difficult to adjust. But I'll describe that a little later on here. Oh, I should keep track of my time here too.
It's okay, we're good.
We'll keep track. And so I know that I had started here with 8 minutes. So with the stops are on both sides, and that holds the lower sash in. So if I remove one of those, what's convenient then, of course, is that now this window here was retrofitted with these aluminum weather seals. Is that visible in the camera?
I can move the camera up.
Yeah, that's okay.
There we go.
This is not original construction. These were put in, sometimes they're ubiquitous. They were used 60s, 70s, up to the early 80s. And even now, there's retrofit companies that do that. They'll extrude these out and install them in. Very convenient, but it makes it a little more difficult to pull the sash out. But otherwise, if these aren't in here, then all it is that once you pull a window stop out, you can simply swing the sash out. This will come out on its own.
That would be handy.
If you do have then this aluminum weather seal, is that they're typically nailed only in two spots, the bottom and the top. So then what you have to do is take a small putty knife or a nail puller, and you just gently wedge that nail off to, in effect, slide the whole thing off. So that's part of the double hung structure then for the lower sash. Then this part here, the two parts that hold the upper sash together, are called the parting beads. All right? And so, it's easy to describe it, if you were looking downward, let's say you were standing on top of that ceiling and you were looking downward. So I'm not going to demonstrate because I don't have a ladder big enough. All right. So what you have is then you have the upper sash here, and you have these two little pieces of wood that are sticking out. Those are called the parting beads, and that's what the upper sash is running up and down on. And then the lower sash is cruising along above it as well. And that's what separates the two double hung windows. And you'll find that construction in any type of window you have. Okay, make sense?
Makes sense.
All right. So for the folks who are just joining us here, we're talking about double hung windows. And so just to give you the recap here, they're called double hungs because traditionally windows were always built where the upper sash would be able to move. So they're hung separately, two hung windows, double hung. Makes sense? Sometimes some construction, especially smaller windows, they might call them single hung. So these here have then weights. And this is a common structure that you have in windows. Double hung windows built through the 17th, 18th centuries up to the early 19th century didn't have any tape balances or weights, so they were simply sliding up and down on their own. So the idea was then there's sometimes little hooks on the side, or if you've ever been to the Shaker Museum, for example, they have little elegant ones. They look like little butterflies, and the idea was then you could raise the sash up and then push the little butterfly wing in to hold it. These double hungs then have counterbalancing weights inside the pocket here. So you always see that for every window, there's a space in between. You have a casement, and behind that casement is an empty shaft, the balance shaft, and that's where the two balances are that the windows are held on. So there's a set of balances, one on each side for this lower sash, and then another set of balances for this upper sash. These are held with sash cord. In this case here, this is a sash chain. So starting about 1865 to the turn of the centuries, it's more common to see sash cord. They were always cotton, but you could sometimes find sash chain as well. There's nothing particularly different about them or structurally different. It was just more elegant looking. And so then to access those, we can't see it because these liners are in here, but right behind this is a little trap door called the balance door. And so that's the idea, is that if a sash cord ever broke, you pop the little door open here, and that gives you access into the weight pocket where the weight is. And that's the idea, is you can fix the sash chain or the sash cord by reattaching it to the weight. That's a whole separate technique of how you do that, but my job here is explaining what it is. Good so far?
Good.
Okay.
Makes sense.
All right, so we're about 3-minute mark. So that's what you'll typically run into then when you're looking at an older house or building. 2 weights, 1 on each side, so 4 altogether for the double hung. Starting about the turn of the century, for only a short period of time, 1900 to about 1920s, is you might find it, if you have a home, that eliminated the counterweights and instead used a thin piece of tape called a tape balance. And that was kind of back in the turn of the century, the modern way of eliminating the weight pocket. All it is, it's a little device on top, and there's a piece of tape that goes, a metal tape that goes right into the sash. And it's got a spring.
So it's made from metal?
Yeah.
Tape? Okay.
Yeah, metal tape, right. And so it was spring loaded on top. And so the idea is you eliminate the weight pocket, the tape balance would have a spring tension to hold the sash up or down.
Which is better?
Well, it was kind of the idea, it's not really better, it's just a different technology.
Yeah.
So then for anyone who has a home where they're buying mid-century from, say, the 1930s to up to the mid-60s, then a different type of weight balance system was used called a spring. So I'm going to draw what in effect is the jam here. So this jam is what you would see here. This is the jam. And in the middle of the jam is a spring, just like this. A little metal spring. Like that. And what it is the bottom part attaches to the sash, and then the top part is attached to the window jamb.
But it's still in the pocket.
Yeah, exactly. So there's no weight pocket.
Oh, right. I see.
So the spring can come in a variety, 2 different main ways. Either it would be an exposed, where it's set inside a little channel like this, or it's a little tube that actually is attached to the top of the jamb like this, and the little tube goes all the way down. Those are tube springs. Yeah. And so those are pretty straightforward to replace. They're a little fussy, but that's pretty straightforward as far as it's unhooking it from the screw up on top and then unscrewing it from it's actually attached to the bottom. So that's the basic nomenclature of historical windows. Now we're going to touch on, we're running out of time here, but I want to touch on Kim's question in particular is what do I do when my windows won't go up or down? So let's touch on that very briefly. Let's say this was Kim's window and she's saying, I can just barely nudge it, right Kim?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Well, I can nudge it open, I'm just worried about it closing.
Sure, okay, so let's say with a little bit of strength, you can nudge it open, but now you're afraid can't close it. Okay. Mm-hmm. So there's a couple points of friction. One point of friction is inside the jamb itself. Typically they're all painted in and gunked in. So one thing to look at is an opportunity when the window's down is to use that soy gel paint remover and get rid of all that gunky paint that's on the side of the jamb and get it down to bare wood. Second is the window stop. And you recall that in the beginning of the session I pulled it off. Okay? So when you pull that window stop off, typically there's a lot of paint gunk and build up on the inside. So what you can do, Kim, is that you can pull this out, your window stop off, and then again remove all that paint, whether you want to sand it, soy gel, or some other heat gun, and strip it off and make it nice and smooth. All right. And the last point of friction is in the sash itself. So if you can pull the sash off. Excuse me, getting off camera for a moment. Stay where you are, stay where you are, stay where you are. Is getting this. Canning wax.
What is it?
Canning wax.
Oh.
You just go to the hardware store, it's a box of canning wax. So you put canning wax in, you rub it up and down the jamb like this, carding bead, and then on the paint that you stripped off on your window stop, you put some on there, rub it up and down, and then on the sash itself, you rub it along the side of the sash. And then you put it all back together and then see if you can move it up and down.
And is that like a lubricant then? It sort of acts...
Yes, because canning wax will stay on top of the wood fiber and create a slick surface for it to go up and down.
Perfect.
You don't want to use WD-40 or some other petroleum product because that soaks into the wood and stains it. That is our topic for window infrastructure.
I have a question.
Sure.
What's the best thing to use to strip? Do you like the soy? Do you like the heat gun? What is preferable?
Sure. For the casual homeowner.
I am a casual homeowner.
Casual in the sense that you don't do it for a living. That's
yeah.
But you're very good at what you do. You'd be amazed to watch Kim's videos. Like,
oh no.
Now I'm going to paint my lampshade. Wow,
thank God for time lapse.
Okay. So what heat gun is nice and relatively inexpensive because the heat, as long as you're aiming the gun at whatever it is, let's say you're stripping the paint off, let's say this thing here. So you're going, you're just kind of waving it gently back and forth and then using your putty knife to just push that old paint off as you're using the gun. So that's convenient. And then for really stubborn things, like the window jamb, where you don't want to play around with a heat gun, or on your window itself, then what's it called? Oh, citrus.
Oh, the citrus peel?
Yeah, I call it soy, but it's citrus, yeah. Citrus peel, is it?
It's something like, it smells like orange.
Yeah. And understandably, it's a little frustrating and tedious because it works slow. What it does is, to make it environmentally benign, it absorbs into the paint. You've got several layers of paint. Say that's one layer, 2 layers, 3 layers. Okay, so you got 3 layers of paint on your window, and now you're applying your citrus peel on it. What it does is it penetrates and the paint and then neutralizes. So once it neutralizes, it becomes benign itself. So that way it's environmentally innocuous or less hazardous, give it a term. So what it does is, it's a little frustrating if you're not used to it, because you're scraping it with your putty knife and you're going, oh, it's only getting that first layer up. Well, that's the reason why, because it's all neutralized.
Right.
So once you get that first layer off,
do you have to put it on again?
exactly.
Oh.
You apply more citrus peel on the next layer, and then that penetrates that whole paint and neutralizes it.
Is that the same way Eco Strip works?
Yeah.
It's a soy-based one.
Yep, that soy. That's why I'm saying soy. Yeah. So that was
How-
the reason. That's the reason why then the state and of course the federal government too started prohibiting those really nasty chemical ones, the ones that give you chemical burns if you're exposed to it.
If it, yeah. How long do you have to wait between the?
About an hour, maybe a little more.
Right.
For the heat gun, do you have to worry about lead fumes?
Not necessarily, as long as you're careful. If it starts smoking, that's you're hitting it with too much heat. So
you have
that's
to
why I
pull
use the
back?
term kissing. You're just taking the surface, taking the gun, and you're doing this. You're going. And as soon as you see any wisps of smoke, just take the gun away, because it's just going to start to scorch. Unless you just keep working it. And same principle might apply here. You might get that first layer up, and there's a deeper, more antique layer underneath. So once you get that first layer off, then you take that heat gun, and you're just doing the same thing again. You're just working it.
So you don't let it kind of sit for too long.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
that's why I use the term kiss it. You're just kissing it with the heat. Just
Kind of like when you blow dry your hair. You don't want to do
Yeah.
one area too much.
Yeah, just as you start seeing the paint start to bubble up, that's a good sign. If it starts getting dark and then it's emitting fumes, then then that you're hitting it too hard. Your question is you should be careful. You should wear a dust mask. Ideally, do it outdoors and wear a dust mask, but you don't necessarily have to wear a full respiratory gear.
And what about heat and the window glass?
Right, so that's the problem, is that with glass, when you apply heat to it, especially old glass, it'll crack. So the best thing is to take the glass off. Now, yours is more intricate, so that may not be part of the, so it may be, like with yours, I might offer is you could use the heat gun to do the outer part, the stile and the rail, and then those little mountains in between is perhaps well, they're very thin, aren't they? They're very thin, and they got the glazing on both sides.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So what you can experiment with, because it's the only one you're doing, right? It's the only window you're doing.
Yeah, 2 windows.
Oh, well, okay, so 2 of them. Best bet may be, let's take your window where it's like decorative glass. It's like a little triangle, right? Some of them are like a little triangle. Oh, like a little diamond. Okay, so let's take a little diamond, right? Okay, so let's a little diamond. Okay, so you got a little diamond, and you got, and I'm going to use a different color. So now you got the glazing here along the sides. Okay. So I'm pausing because the problem is, of course, if you crack the glass, do you cut glass?
I would prefer not.
Your best bet, the safest bet, is to use the citrus peel.
Okay.
Now, with the glazing, actually, if I can be helpful, is if the glazing is in good condition, you don't necessarily have to take it out. It's up to you.
Bad condition.
If it's bad condition, it should be able to flake off with a putty knife.
Most half of it has, so.
Okay. All right. So where let's say you can knock some of it off, and then some of it still is stubborn. Okay. So I'm gonna you do like this. Say that the blue represents what's still stubbornly on there. Okay. So the best bet is then to take a big sheet of heavy-duty aluminum foil, wrap it up into about like 4 layers. and then lay that aluminum foil on the side on top of the glass, like that.
So you make a heat shield.
Right up against the glazing. Yes, like a heat shield. Exactly. So let's thicken this glazing up. So then as you're using the heat gun, you're putting the heat gun as much as you can directly onto the glazing away from the glass. So the aluminum foil acts like a heat shield. And so when you turn it on, well, I should use my other putty knife. Oh, heat gun, putty knife. So as you're putting it on there, just kissing it a little bit, and then just keep trying to work it off like this. And your helpful tip is to always press against.
What temperature do you have the heat gun at?
Oh, well, they normally have like 2 or 3 settings.
So you're at low?
Yeah,
high?
probably like between mid and high.
Mid and high. Okay.
Mid
so
and high, yeah. Because low would be too long. You'd be waiting forever.
you'd be like this.
It's okay. It's okay. It's just that it's slower. So you're sacrificing some risk for expediency.
And what's the disadvantage of using like a commercial peeler? You go to like Home Depot, you get the commercial, for stripping paint, the commercial stripper.
Oh,
He means like not a
speed-
soy or
the speed
citrus
meter?
peel.
Yeah. No,
Like the one you
citrus
take,
peel?
like the.
Oh, there's no difference. Citrus peel just takes time.
no, I'm sorry, at Home Depot you can go buy a commercial stripper.
I know what you're talking about. The Cobra speed heater.
No, it's actually it's a chemical. The chemical is just on the. You can go and buy a commercial. You just paint it on and it pulls it off. I don't know if it's.
So it's and you know the citrus and the soy.
I'm not familiar with it.
I don't think it's environmentally friendly.
Yeah, I think it's like
Well,
one of the
that's
sort
just
of
it, yeah.
harsher ones.
That's just that's the environment is the.
Is it also harsh to the wood?
All of those is a yes. Right.
Yeah.
Older wood, yeah, because the idea is that people who had used it learned how to neutralize it once it's done its work. Remember when I mentioned about how it penetrates and neutralizes on its own?
Right.
The real nasty stuff doesn't neutralize.
So you put
It's
paint
just like
on
in the
it,
movie. It's like in the
then
movie
it's
Alien
paint.
when they cut the alien's leg and the acid keeps dripping between the floors.
Yeah.
Same
It
principle.
goes through the layers in the wood.
Yeah,
Just looking at-
it just
okay.
it remains nasty. So the people who used to do it for a living is, of course, part of what you have to do is once it reaches the layer of wood, you'd have to neutralize the wood so that it wouldn't eat the new paint that you're putting on it.
Right.
Right. What was I getting at? Oh, so when you're using your heat gun and you got glass and you got that aluminum foil, you're just kissing it enough where you. That's what I want to get at. So when you're loosening up the glazing, always leverage against the wood. Never leverage against the glass. If you do this and try to pull it up, you crack the glass.
Right.
Because glass is sensitive. You put any weight on it, it's going to crack it.
Especially with the heat.
Well, the idea is that the glass is sensitive, and I've learned from bad experience myself. Is you figure you just could do like this, right? Go, why can't I just do this? Well, because the glass is sensitive and you're putting weight on it. So you're always pushing against the wood and trying to lift it this way.
What
That
about
make
if
sense?
there's paint on the glass? Do you just
Oh, just use a razor blade.
use a razor blade? Just,
Yes.
Okay.
So once everything is cleaned up, you take a little razor and you just take the razor and you scrape the paint off the glass like this. So to wrap up then, aluminum foil, kiss it with the heat gun, get it soft enough where you take the heat gun away and then work it against the wood to gently pull the glazing off. You can give it a little hammer, like I've done that sometimes. Hammer's over here. Or it's sort of like when you're a kid, you got a loose tooth and you know it's coming out. Same idea. So you're just taking your chisel there, you're just going, just gently chiseling it, chisel, just gently, little taps, and half the time it'll pop out on its own. If it's still real stubborn, don't fight it. Just hit it with a heat gun again, and then just keep working at it. So it's a little time and
You
patience.
use your putty knife, not a real chisel.
Oh, well, I was just demonstrating, but a chisel is awful handy, an old chisel, yeah. Because especially an old chisel with a small blade to it. because you can just gently stick it on the glazing like this, and you're just going tap 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 tap. Okay.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah.
Number one.